Welcome to Blue Collar Mystics, the under-the-hood approach to the depths of human consciousness. So many mysteries, so little time, so many big words. That's why we aim to take the mystical and make it practical, usable in your everyday life. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? Like, who am I? What is this? Is it a hologram? Is this some kind of weird cosmic joke? Hey, these are the questions that we are trying to get to the bottom of as we explore the final rabbit hole together here as Blue Collar Mystics. We are live here, Blue Collar Mystics. We're doing a redux of the Reality Transurfing Book. We've been doing this weekly for quite some time. I'm your host, Bootsy Greenwood, Owen Hunt, and with me is Abbie Johnson, Abstract One.
That's right. How's it going, Bootsy?
It's going good. We are not live on Instagram. Something happened there. So we're not live on Facebook or Instagram, but we are live on Rockfin and YouTube. Hop in the chat if you're out there. Thanks for hanging out with us. Going through this stuff every single week. I've been reading the Kabbalion and working on a project regarding that. And I see a lot of crossover in here. This particular chapter was really cool and insightful into the realm of polarity specifically. But there's a lot of really cool stuff. And we've been sort of dissecting this model for quite some time. And it gets more nuanced as the book kind of goes on. This chapter was pretty interesting. What were your thoughts about rereading it again?
It kind of was all over the place, was it not? But the big theme is taking you back to pendulums, but it's kind of more how you can use them and how you're being used by them, but how to use them the most effectively if you are. So how to get something out of it.
Yeah, it talks a lot about energy and polarity and gives some really cool examples. One of my favorite examples of this chapter is he's talking about like whenever you're walking down the sidewalk and you want to pass somebody and they kind of step in your way when you try to pass them on the one way, and then you step the other way and they kind of seem to get in your way again. It's like,
and they don't even see you because they're walking the same direction. So and it's inevitable sometimes, and it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, he kind of returns to pendulums. And really, one of the things, I think this is a very interesting chapter. It is all over the place, but there's a lot of like really interesting things to think about, like the idea of pendulum networks, and just how these pendulums are working in nature. It's just the structure of like how reality works. These things are just out there doing. He even compares like a anthill to a factory and says it's basically, in essence,
yeah. And he says that
run by pendulums.
That's the thing, is that we could look at these things in nature, like an anthill or a school of fish or, a flock of birds, and they all seem to be moving in complete unison. And you could think maybe they're like telepathically communicating or some sort of communication. But if you take a fish and you put it, in the same proximity of another fish, but they're not in a school of fish, and you are terrorizing one fish, the other fish is just gonna sit there. It's not gonna act like telepathically, it's not gonna interact with that fish. It's totally, um so that this is something outside of it. It's not something that's coming from the inside. And then he's kinda said the same thing with the anthill. An anthill, they say, like, there's no leader per se, but they all do their work and they all work together. And um, the interesting thing, science tells us it's a pheromone issue. Like they just put off a scent and then they know what to do. But I forget what he said about that. That's basically like if you were saying that it's just all pheromones. I don't remember the point, but it was pretty good. It was pretty profound.
Right on. All right. I am able to get us on Instagram as well. So I'm going to do it through the Blue Collar Mystics page. It's not through. Yeah. It took me a second, but I think we got it.
Period.
Yeah. So maybe some people will tune in that way. Thanks everybody for being here in the chat. Say hello, please reach out. We've really dug down deep into this book, and there's a lot of little nuanced things to it. And I've started to, it pairs well. It just pairs well with other things. And it's funny when people read this book alongside other books. Like I recently have been reading the Kabbalion, and like a lot of these same things are in here as is in Transurfing, but it's just presented, in a different way. But you start to see.
Well, yeah, you see it in psychology books. You can see it in like the Hermetic principles, all of it. It's all, and that's the last chapter he said that there is an overlap, and that's when you start to see the overlap. That's when you really don't need to learn anymore. You've got it. Like everything that you need to learn isn't going to be in a book at this point. It's going to be you accessing and trusting your intuition and moving into your heart and finding this space in the alternative space to find the esoteric, the things that your soul needs to find.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, because he talks a lot about intention in this book. In this Kabbalion book, they talk about the duality of mind. We're talking about the duality of mind in this book as well, the heart and mind. And basically, he's making a distinction. I think when Vadim is talking about intention, what they're talking about in the Kabbalion is essentially the same thing, but defined as will. Because the way that the mental idea works in manifestation is that you impress an image upon the mental womb, which is the feminine aspect of the consciousness, with the masculine will. And then that creates the momentum to nurture whatever that is and bring it into the earth, whatever the creative thing is. It's the internal connection of heart and mind, you could say, as well, the way that Vadim says it. But that's basically, what all this esoteric stuff is saying is essentially the same thing. And they talk a lot about pendulums and polarity in here too, which is wild. Very, very cool.
Do they actually call them pendulums, or is it just...
They do call them pendulums. Yeah, it's in the principle of rhythm, and it says that there is a pendulum that is swings. And so so Vadim says to step aside of the pendulum, but in Hermetics, it's about alchemy, so it's about rising above the swing of the pendulum. So you can actively be consciously more in your... There's two consciousnesses, the I and the me. The I being the static awareness, and then the B, or the me, being the fluctuating emotions and the constant stream of thought and all of that, right? And so that's the feminine mind, but the masculine mind is the observing mind, the static mind.
But do you think that's what he means by like drawing back your awareness and stuff? Like it's
Exactly.
actually the person that holds the pendulum instead
100%.
Yeah,
absolutely. So it's about like rising up and higher states, closer and closer to the I consciousness on the scale, and withdrawing from the the me consciousness, or I don't know, maybe withdrawing is not the best word, but whatever.
He kind of starts this out by talking about there's like everything new becomes mundane. And I feel like we've been talking about this a little bit lately, in several groups. Like everything new does become mundane, whether it's an item or an idea or the goal. Like once you reach your goal, it's now your new level, right? You've leveled up. And so he kind of gets into boredom and what is boredom? Like what causes boredom? And he said, but when you get into what causes boredom, it's kind of like what is boredom? And he said that boredom is really your instinct to want to control reality because it's all a game.
Hmm.
And kids know that. That's why kids sit and play and they enjoy playing. And when you interrupt their play, they kind of get pissed. But we play too. We play our jobs, we play work, but we call it work. So we forget that it's a game.
Yeah, it starts to become important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. I love that. Yeah, he says that boredom is the inability to control reality.
Yeah.
I think that's very profound because it's like if you could do what you wanted to do, you'd be doing it. You wouldn't be fucking bored. That's a lame ass excuse. You know what I mean? Maybe you
Yeah.
just don't know what you want, which is okay. Or maybe you just don't have the ability cultivated yet. You haven't learned how to get whatever that is or give whatever you're trying to put out there. I don't know. It's pretty good point though. And that's again moving, back from participant to observer or from the me to the I. It's synonymous between those two.
Yeah. But we get wrapped up in the game of pendulums and importance um and that's the thing. You always have to remember that the pendulum is all about conformity. It's the rule of the pendulum is do as I do. And so you always lose your individuality in that. And he kind of talks about indigo children, which I think that was like a big topic in the 70s or 80s. These children that were born with darker colored aura, and they were quite different. They didn't want to conform, and they were. And actually, I think I know a couple of these people now.
The punk
You know,
rockers.
yeah, I can name a couple that I podcast with. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but that we end up, even the indigos, even though they had a natural proclivity to want to be their true authentic self, and all children do, you know, they end up we school them. We send them off to schools to teach them how to think and how to act, and eventually they cave in because they want loneliness, I would say, really. It kind of comes down to wanting to be accepted, and wanting to be accepted means that you conform. You do as the pendulum says, you do as I
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people, I mean, all of us, we've all lost our individuality because of pendulums to an extent.
Yeah, we've been conditioned in a large part. Becoming aware of that, obviously lessens the influence, but for sure we have come under the influence of those pendulums. What he talks about is breaking free of that, becoming an individual and breaking the rule of the pendulum, and also talks about the second rule of the pendulum, which is to stabilize the structure. So kind of cementing this hierarchy in place is the second sort of segment of the pendulum network, so to speak. It's like once it kind of has its
It shifts
momentum.
your goals and stuff. So then you want to work for the pendulum. Your goals are no longer your goals. Your goals are the pendulum's goals. Yeah. It stabilizes the structure. It keeps you wrapped up in it. Even though that's not really what your heart wants, that's not what your feel like your purpose here is, but it ends up becoming all of those things for you. So he said that the rule of transurfing, though, so the rule of the pendulum is do as I do, but the rule of transurfing is you're free to be who you are, and everyone else is free to be exactly who they are. And it's about being your authentic self, really. Like, you're free to be that. You're free to be weird. You're free to be kooky and like the things that you like.
Absolutely. And you've got to give up control over trying to control other people or the,
Yeah.
whatever that is,
Their
that
way of
tendency.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Or whatever, trying to, yeah, change anybody else because you're not going to do that. So instead, allow yourself to be yourself and embrace that. This is something that because of this Kabbalion book and, Transurfing too, they're starting to overlap. There's I'm going to make a video about this because it talks about how to polarize yourself so that you're not affected by the swing of the pendulum. So I don't know, I think of a simple example, like there was gas shortage thing and gas went crazy, right? Like people freaked out, they all went and bought gas. But if you're at home, you're just like, this is going to be over in a couple days, I'm good. I got a can of gas, you know what I mean, or whatever. I'm not going to trip. Then you just wait it
You
out.
couple. That is such a Southern thing. Just saying.
Yeah, of
I'd
course.
never heard it till I moved here.
That's so funny. But yeah, I mean, that's going to pass, right? Like you can put yourself in a higher position and let that swing happen back and forth. And, you're just because you have more awareness and you're like, oh, okay, this is a temporary thing. It's not a big deal. I don't have to freak out. I can take a step back, move to or toward observer or the I, the static self. And also what I'm thinking about is the higher self, right? What is your higher self? And maybe sit down and think about that for a minute and define it, because the way that the Kabbalion says to polarize yourself is to polarize yourself positively. And that would be to the higher self. So if you polarize yourself to the higher self, and I think this is what transfiguration is that you polarize yourself to your highest self, and then you'll remain static and above any of the sort of pendulum swings at that point. But by focusing on it, you cultivate that vibration through attention. And then you start to become a better version of yourself just by focusing on what that standard is. So in transfiguration is when they look up, at Jesus and they take on his characteristics. So you could be your own, sort of, like, I don't know if you should make a graven image of yourself, but you know what I'm saying? But like have your own higher self in mind, like who is that person, define it, write a couple pages or whatever, and at least visualize what that is so that you can focus on it. Maybe you do draw a picture. I don't know, whatever you want, right? Like it's your world. But I think it's a really powerful idea and concept, even if you've never even thought about it. Like, what is your higher self? What is that? And
I would add the transurfing twist to that, because the one thing he does kind of hit on that in this chapter, in a sense, he says that you shouldn't, when you're imagining your higher self, you shouldn't, or, talking about the conformity of pendulums, when you're thinking about these things, think about what's imposed upon you, because most of your morals and values were taught to you to teach you to conform. So they're not necessarily yours. So your highest self might not believe those things.
that's a good point as well. I mean, just trying to consider for a second, what that is and what that filter might look like, right? Like that alone. It's kind of like the quantum entanglement thing, right? Like you put yourself on that highest timeline. Well, what would that version of me do? Well, who is your higher self? Just to, just
Yeah.
think about those things. And you're not going to always fall or, live up to that standard. But the point is to basically connect with it and try to
Oscillate at that
exactly
vibration and
oscillate
then
at that
become it.
frequency.
Yeah,
And
frequency,
eventually,
there it
yeah,
is.
100% you can. I mean, you can. I mean, and not to say, nobody's perfect, right? But like that's the whole, to
Yeah,
me, that's
no,
the whole
we'll
point of,
still be human.
that's the Jesus thing, right? Like that's the whole transfiguration. It's like just be that. Like, that's a great example of a higher self. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You
That's a
totally see the overlap in all of this too with Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. I like just another way to look at it all. Like the whole, because you're bringing up the polarities and stuff, the positive or negative polarities, and then the law of hypnotic rhythm. I mean, I just think of a pendulum swinging because it is like it's the part of the game that entrances you, it hypnotizes you.
Yeah, hypnotism is a good term for it too,
Yeah.
because it's like he talks about it. It's like you fall asleep, you doze off, you go to sleep, and most people, and are just not even aware. I was looking for my
And
pen.
it's not even that you're even conforming to the rules of the pendulum, then you actually are doing things you never thought you would do. And that's not necessarily a good thing.
No.
Sometimes it's good, but in this case, it's not good.
Well, if you choose to, it is good.
Yeah.
And he talks about those levels of consciousness too in this chapter, where he's like, if you're at home by yourself, you're kind of like not self-aware. And if you're in a crowd, like a big crowd, you're like really under the influence of kind of social pressure and you're not that self-aware. But if you're in like a small group, then you're much more self-conscious, because everyone can kind of see each other and they can kind of like judge each other. But yeah, I mean, you see people act out of character all the time. They're spray painting, buildings, or setting things, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And
Vagina hats.
sure, vagina hats. You never know. It's wild out there.
It is wild out there.
He does talk about flash mobs in this chapter too, and sex.
Yeah, it's funny how he actually uses flash mobs as a metaphor for sex.
Yeah. And the entities that come and harvest the energy of sex.
Yeah.
Pretty
Oh,
wild.
it is wild. I don't know why I didn't take so much of this in before, because a lot of this what I got from median.com or whatever, like blogs. But yeah, he gets into the some of the things he said about sex. Um, he at one point he says that it really shouldn't be called making love,
Yeah.
because really love and sex exist separately, and sex isn't actually it's an act of aggression. It's an animal instinct, and it doesn't matter if you're doing it sweetly. It's always an act of aggression, really. And it's not to say that you can't have love and sex coexist, but really they're two different things. And all these ancient tribes knew that there was like entities around when you're having in the throes of passion, and he said that they're there, they harvest the energy, but it's just energy that's there anyway. So it's not, you're not losing energy by doing it. It's energy you're already expending.
Yeah,
So weird.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. He says it doesn't matter, but he does mention it.
Well, he gets into sexual hangups too.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
he said if you put everybody in a stadium and you ask everyone to stand up has a sexual hang up, but if they were honest, it would be almost every single person. And one thing he said is that almost every relationship that has issues, it stems from sexual hangups. And I would love to disagree with that, but I don't really. I think that it's true. Sexual incompatibility is a big deal.
Yeah.
And actually, I was talking about this with Cheney earlier, and she said, "Well, I would say it's usually probably finances and then sexual hangups." But then we kind of went back around, because if a person has a sexual hangup or a sexual issue with their partner, like a woman, what's she gonna do? Is she gonna say anything? Probably not. She's probably just gonna spend money, right? So really, they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the points he's trying to make too is that everyone has inadequacies and feels maybe a little bit self-conscious about sex, and particularly that's because of the media and particularly fucking
Yeah.
porn at this point, right? Like that
Well,
whole industry kind
maybe.
of guides. Well, I mean, there's a
But
lot of different things.
Even Disney or
Sure.
romantic comedies, all of it does it. Like, we have been conditioned to think that relationships look like this and sex should be like this and
100%.
happily ever after.
Right.
And it's not that there's some big ol' media agenda to do it, it's just a good story, but when we start to think that that's how relationships are and what, like, sex should be based off of all the media that we're consuming,
Right.
then we have these weird standards.
Well, he says that we compare ourselves to that and then try to emulate it. And yeah. And that's, I mean, I think that is largely true, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, right after that he talks about this one lady who had never had sex, and she was like 30 years old, and she said she was attractive and all that. She just didn't see what the big deal was, but she, you know, kind of felt like people judged her for it. And Vadim said that she almost had it as far as her individuality. The only thing was she was kind of had a chip on her shoulder about people judging her for not having sex.
But otherwise, yeah, she was golden, and
Yeah.
that's
Otherwise,
fine.
she was like super herself and not, influenced or swayed by pendulums, which is an interesting point.
Yeah, people's opinions. It's funny. But there was more on the sexual hangups. It was
There's a whole lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like, it was a lot of good information.
Well, I agree with them. Sex is more, there's a scale, right? Like the sex, and then love scale. They're definitely different. I mean, you can find the same, in a person. He does say that, so that's great. But in general, you notice the polarity, is a very sexual thing.
I think it comes back around to being open and honest with the person that you're with about your sexual hangups, probably. That's a huge deal. But then he says that, the sex god that's around or whatever, like, become it. Like, let it move through you and become
Yeah.
that. Like, don't sit there and be in your head.
Right.
Like, don't have rules. There's nothing. Like, I feel like I'm Dr. Ruth here. Like, there's nothing perverted between two people in their bedroom. You've been socially conditioned to think that certain
Right.
things are wrong, and maybe they're not wrong. If you're in the moment and it feels good, then it's okay, and you don't have to feel bad about it.
Right. Like, yeah,
Two consenting
exactly.
adults.
Not being self-conscious and allowing yourself to be primal and satisfying yourself.
Yeah. And then he said, then you can add the concept of frailing, but you have to have those other elements, because if it's just about frailing, then it's never going to be great for you. And, probably eventually you're not going to be sexually compatible, but
Yeah, I mean, obviously not everyone is,
obviously.
But anyway, no, I think that's a really interesting, and it's a great thing to keep in mind, right? Like it makes you feel a little bit less self-conscious, right? Like that everyone's going to have their own insecurities, and to just be able to lean into that and accept it for what it is, instead of it limiting you and then you trying to emulate something that's not really you.
Yeah. It's do as I do. It's a pendulum
It's the
as well.
pendulum, right? It is. That's what I mean, as far as just the proliferation of all media.
Well, even religion. How much does religion affect people's sex lives?
Oh, it had for centuries.
Yeah, like religious guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about the
There
people
were,
that had to have sex with through a hole in a sheet.
I mean, yeah, and there were different consequences then too. I mean, we're talking about maybe before birth control. We're talking about, before some certain technological advances and things. So,
Penicillin.
right? Exactly.
That would be another consequence.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, no, that whole thing, it's fascinating to me for sure. It's very, very interesting. But I mean, we see here in the Transurfing book that, nature has its own way, and the balance will be struck. It talks about it in this Kabbalion book too, and it talks about how new Adam is made. And what it says is that the female electron will go off and find a male proton to like, and then it starts to wobble and wiggle and then vibrate and then which is kind of funny, and then and through that connection creates a new atom. I'm summing it up very basically, but that's pretty much what it says. So
Well,
sex is happening on all planes in different ways. I mean, even Robert Monroe talks about how when he first got out of his body, like he had an erection and stuff, and there's sex all over the place. It's getting freaky out there.
oh wow.
Yeah.
I believe it because it happens in the dream space all the time.
I mean, if it's part of as
Um,
above, so below, if it's part of this life, then it exists in other realms,
very true.
whatever you want to
So
call it.
something you said just reminded me that he goes into bad luck too. He really kind of gets deep into bad luck. And one thing that he said that I know he kind of touched on before, but the way he said it in this chapter is that um, nature, we know that nature balances, right? It's a balancing force. It likes to keep the balance, but the reason why is that it doesn't like big expenditures of energy. So nature or the world or whatever is never out to get you. It's never trying to spite you and trying to fuck you up. Like all it's trying to do is just maintain balance because balance is the least amount of energy. So I thought that was a good way to put it, really. Like, it's nice to know that when you're in a downward spiral, it's not necessarily out to get you. It's just that I think that's actually more of a pendulum trying to hook you back in. But
I think so too.
nature itself,
Right.
yeah, nature
Because you want to,
itself is just trying to maintain balance.
well, you just want to celebrate it, right? Like my air conditioner went out. I'm like, hell yeah, sweet. I get to have a
We got a
sauna
sauna up
at the
in here.
house, and I'm gonna, get it all taken care of. It's all good. Celebrate it, and yeah, then it dispels that energy because yeah, it is. It's just trying to hook you and bring you into that, emotional state, right? Instead of you being at the observer point, brings you into participant mode, and you're like, whatever it is. Now you're at the whim of the pendulum, and
Thank you. You just reminded me to wake up.
yeah. No, it is he talks about basically that the pendulum structure is the matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Full
essence.
on calling it the Matrix. And he said that you never have to worry though about being plugged in somewhere. Like your body's not plugged in somewhere. You plug yourself in anytime that your attention gets hooked. So nobody's putting probes on your head. You do it to yourself by not maintaining your attention. I was like, oh dang.
Yeah. By not maintaining your attention, you're putting yourself at the effect of mainstream thought, pendulums, groupthink, culture, society, whatever. And by shifting it to observer, you're moving away from that and putting yourself in a position where you're not going to be so easily swayed.
And he actually gets into the law of polarity in here. He talks about, again, like if you're fighting with somebody
Mm-hmm.
and you want to win, so you're fighting back, you would think that would balance each other out and cancel each other out. But you have to think of it as a pendulum swinging. Like if I push it, then it pushes right back. It might just be two of us fighting. It doesn't have to be a huge group, but it becomes the energy structure that harvests your energy.
And it keeps pushing to,
One way
increase
or
the
another. Yeah.
conflict, and you
Yeah.
can
It's just
see,
gonna swing higher.
yes, exactly. That's the whole,
So adding the opposite doesn't necessarily cancel it out. It doesn't cancel it out. Maintaining your attention and waking up, like even if just one person in the fight is awake and realizes, oh wait, you're stalking yourself now. So, what should Abbie do in this situation?
yeah, I
Instead
mean,
of like, I'm gonna react.
all it takes is 1 minute of losing your attention, and the next thing you know, you're on the side of the highway, beating the crap out
Oh
of
yeah.
somebody or something, like it could happen. I'm just saying, like, it's bananas. These things happen. People they kind of black out even, right? Like you're kind of like see red. If you get some people get super angry, right? Like they completely see red and just are possessed, I guess, and do terrible things.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then forget about it. And they come to and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. It's the pendulum.
It's weird to think of it at like possession, but it really sort of is. It's not demonic, it's just that we know of.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, what do we know?
I mean, that's what I do like about the way he presents it, because like it sounds kind of corny when somebody's like, well, the devil's gonna come in here and take away our, it's like, come on, bro, you know what I mean? But like the idea that our energy is being harvested through this matrix, through this sort of hierarchy that's trying to cement itself in place. Yeah, that seems very on brand, right? Like I'm pretty sure all the mystery schools have some sort of similar tradition or idea that's kind of the basis, like the Gnostics definitely do, right?
Yeah.
And there's more, beyond that talk about this kind of stuff, but the way that he just modernizes it, and yeah, I mean the metaphor of the Matrix, it's still so good. Like we watched the new Matrix, me and my brother, and he's younger. So he had never seen the original Matrix. So we watched the original Matrix right after, and he was like, oh my God, bro. Like his mind was blown. It was so cool to watch. It's
I
like,
expected to not like the new one. I didn't think I would like it. And then I was like, oh, they're doing Sophia, the whole Gnosticism. I did like it.
I liked it too, but I mean, if you had never seen the first one, I was just like, man, I wish I
Yeah.
could watch this again for the first time. It was just like his mind was blowing, and it was like a 20-year-old movie at this point,
Yeah.
but it's still so good, so freaking good. Like the
I watched
metaphor,
it 4 times when it was in the theater.
that's
So
amazing. So
yeah.
fucking good.
Because it's so weird that it really kind of is reality.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it kind of is, but what does he say? What is the beginning of this chapter? It says, my world and I are going for a walk.
Yep.
You got to learn how to go for a walk. Take it for a walk.
Control your layer of reality.
Control your layer of reality, because you can't control anybody else's anyways, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think you can influence people in a positive way and be a good impact and things like that. You can do that, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to do anything for you. That's not, or you can't control anybody or have them, do anything. Nobody owes you shit.
They don't. Yeah. Nobody does owe you shit. I'm not saying that that's in the book or anything, but I mean, that's just kind of been a theme in my life lately. So I'm going to reiterate it.
No, I
It's
mean,
funny. So okay, he gets into he talks about, how do you escape pendulums? You go into hermit mode and live in the mountains. Well, we're all modern people. None
Right.
of us would do very well out in the mountains living
Not
like a
trying to,
hermit.
yeah, don't want that life. No.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
No,
I mean,
we do like our creature comforts and all of that. Though a lot of the things that we want are caused by the pendulum as well. So, but he said, what do you do? If you live in a city and all of that, well, you just make the best choices. So, food wise, what are you going to put in your body? The organic stuff. Um, can you grow your own vegetables? Yeah. Is it going to feed you completely? No. But these are better choices than the apple that is polished and shiny that was grown in the Matrix.
right.
And that's where he gets into energy expenditure and stuff, that
Mm,
you can become a favorite of a pendulum. That's that's ultimately kind of what you want to do,
right.
because you're never going to get out of the game of pendulums. So you want to become
Their favorite.
favored.
Yeah.
Yeah, favored by the pendulum. So whichever pendulum you choose, but it's the pendulum of you, because it's going to have to do with your uniqueness, whatever makes you special. But in this, we'll come back to that, because I actually kind of want to get into
It's beautiful,
the
though.
cost of the pendulum,
Okay, let's
because
talk about that.
it always does cost you something, right? Your time, your money, your health. They, in one way or another, it's going to leech your energy. And if you don't think of money as energy, I'm sorry, it's currency, it's current, it's your money, or it's your time virtually. Um, I would say money is a representation of time, so it is your energy. But toasting at a party when you're drinking, alcohol is always a pendulum, and it's always, which means there's a price to pay. You get an energy boost up front, but you will always pay it back with interest, which is
There's a
why you get
credit.
hungover.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a
So you get a credit. Yeah. Um, and when you have these energy credits, whether it's alcohol or your cigarette, because part of the price is like the constantly thinking about it, right? Um, what else? He even said watching your favorite TV show, while you know that sometimes there's sinister stuff in it, there's always something for you in it too. So when you find that little energy credit, like, you use that to manifest in a way, or and so he said toasting seems like it's old world and it's like superstitious, but really it's very, very powerful. And it is a form of magic, I would say, quote unquote. But when when you toast, though, the problem is that most people toast to the future. And you're on borrowed energy right now. You're drinking alcohol now, so you have this energy boost now. So instead of saying, to the future, to this couple, may you always be like, to our health right now. You don't have to say right now, but to our health. Like, you say it in the present tense. So you affirm it for now. And then it actually, the reality mirror makes it happen. Because if it's in the future, a future event, you're putting it out in the ether, you're putting that wavelength out there, but it's never going to manifest, because you already have the energy credit now, and you'll pay it tomorrow with the hangover, or you could hair of the dog, but if you hair the dog, you eventually will pay
yeah.
too.
Oh, yeah. That's gonna you're just getting taking out more of a loan on that.
Yeah. So you can do it with any of the little bad pendulums you're hooked into. So
Let's
bad,
talk
like,
about that individuality thing where the pendulum lights you up. I think that's really cool.
it is, because we have talked a little bit about it before, about the celebrities that are a little bit different, that have the one defining feature that's maybe wouldn't be seen as beautiful by other people, or maybe they just have the person with the weird fashion taste. They usually become like big time fashion in the fashion industry. It's the people that are dare to be different and be their authentic self that are lit up, or it's in the benefit of a bigger pendulum to light them up. So you could create a masterpiece, a piece of art that's just beautiful, and it might not be seen by anybody, and it might not ever be lit up. But if it's authentic and everything, and if you just keep pushing, then eventually you will be lit up, and you'll be the pendulum. Or if it's in a benefit of a bigger pendulum as well, you'll be lit up as well.
Yeah, it's when you go your own way and do things your own way. Like, it's like success can't be parodied or copied. It's got to be something that you figure out, that's completely different, that's outside of the established sort of way of doing it. And that's when the pendulums have no choice but to light you up as you're doing something different, and you've made it your own way. That's kind of the game of transurfing, I guess, is to get lit up by the pendulums at some point.
Yeah. He talks about the Beatles and how the Beatles were just this little band in the UK, and doing little dive bars. And at one point they were interviewed, and George Harrison had said, we have this little ritual we do every night before we go on. John will say, "Who are we?" And they'll say, "We're number one. We're gonna be number one." And that's not necessarily what did it, but I would say that that's almost like playing a goal slide in a sense. But they stuck with it long enough. They finally had a hit on the radio, and it was number one in the UK. But then all the craze died down. It was like they were going to be a one-hit wonder, but they didn't stop what they were doing. They still were making music and recording, and then about 6 months later, they blew up. Like, everyone was in love with the Beatles because they were just this authentic sound. There was something about them that made them different, so the pendulum decided to light them up. And then following the UK, the whole world went into the same thing happened with the ABBA too.
Gimme, gimme, gimme a man after midnight. I love ABBA, dude.
I'm more of a Beatles person.
I love the Beatles too. I mean, dude,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I'm a huge, huge fan of all that stuff. But
But yeah,
yeah,
ABBA was on like Eurovision or something, which it would be probably like American Idol, and they didn't even look like they were gonna win. Like, they weren't a fan favorite. They ended up winning though, and they had a hit, but nobody who ever wins this show or this tournament or whatever ever became really famous. And so after their one hit, the craze died down, and then a little bit later, it's like their authentic sounds still shone through it. And they weren't creating disco or anything like that. The disco had already been around, but all of a sudden they were lit up, and then they became ABBA.
I love that. I think that's so cool. It's inspiring, right? To just stick with it.
Yeah, because that was the common theme between the two, is that they both had success, but the success seemed to just to
Dwindle.
die down.
Yeah.
But they continued to develop their craft, and then all of a sudden they became not only stars but superstars, supernovas.
Oh boy. Yeah,
Someone,
they were huge. Oh boy. Somebody saying the live stream's out.
I know, I'm like, oh, oops.
Well, oh well. Well, I guess we're just sorry about that. Hope it comes back. It says we're live.
It does say we're live.
We'll keep going. Because I am recording anyway, so we'll put it out. Okay, they refreshed. Okay, good. Good. Wonderful. I'm so glad. Then it's working. Yeah, no, that's inspiring to me. I love it to see that, somebody could go out there, have a little bit of success, and then it dwindle, but then they continue with it, keep going forward, and just
Because I think
stay
in that
true to
little
it.
short period is where you almost become more authentic.
More resilient too.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, this is my thing. I'm doing it. I'm just going to keep doing it, success
Yeah,
or
no matter
not.
what I'm gonna do it, eventually success is gonna hit me, and then
Right.
you've played that slide in your head enough that Like, it becomes pure intention.
Yeah, and I don't want to get off too much on a rabbit trail here, but I have been thinking about that intention triangle thing some more, and just like I saw the triangle. Thank you for that. It's like, you know, intention is on one side, and then actions on the other side, and the results on the bottom. So you need two. You need to have either a strong intention or strong action in order to get the result. Correct?
Yeah, because if you have there's always gotta be what's weird is that I found that in my phone on accident today, and I had created it over a year ago for someone else, so I don't even know how I pulled it up. I think it was just, like, memories or something, so it's really weird, and I don't
Wow.
even know who I shared it with. But, yeah, you think of the triangle on each side, one side is intention, one is action, and one is result, and you always have to have 2 strong sides and 1 weak side. They can't all 3 be strong. So, if you want the strong result, the result that you desire to have, then you have to have a strong action and a weak intention, or a strong intention and a weak action. Because if you have a strong intention and a strong action, you always get a weak result. Like, it's like you're trying too hard.
Trying too hard. Yeah, got it. So would you say that intention is linked with attraction in the
Like
way?
law of attraction?
Yeah, kinda.
I mean, yeah, because your intention, because intention isn't desire.
It's not.
It's become more than that. You've developed past want.
And
You've gotten to the point
attraction,
where
yeah,
this is what I'm gonna do.
yeah, right.
This is what's gonna happen. I might not know all the steps to get there, but it's gonna happen. Like, it's that knowing. So, knowing, like, if intention, action, result, so if I'm creating something and I wanna start with a strong intention, like a presentation for work or something like that, I'm gonna create a good presentation for work. Well, I can go the whole route where I sit there and bullet point it out, and I do all of my, like, outline it beforehand and all of that, but if I do that, and it might look like a good presentation, but it might not hit the audience like I want it to.
Mhm.
Like, it might not have the result I want it to have, like, it might look really generic. So, if I just go into it with the intention of creating, like, a presentation that will, knock everyone off their feet, and then just get started and do it, then the result is gonna probably be better than I would even expect it to be. But if I go into all the stages of planning, this is the opposite of school, because school, it seems like you always want to be very methodical in how you do things, but really, I would say in real life, when they're not looking for a specific recipe or a specific, equation to do it, where you're being graded on the equation part of it, uh, it's better to have the strong intention and just start, and then you'll get the strong result. And then the same can be said opposite wise. If I don't really know what I want to do, but I just start acting and I act strong, I just maybe I don't know what I'm going to write about, but I'm going to just bullet point some stuff out, or, do a mind dump, and I start, outlining stuff. Then all of a sudden, like, I didn't have a great intention at the beginning, but it developed into something awesome. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, there's nuance to that. I think, I'm fascinated by it.
I think with the strong action, you're gonna see that in a lot of, like, creative people.
Yeah,
They
I mean,
might
but it
they I
also
mean,
the other
you
can
always have an
happen.
intention, but it doesn't have to be,
Right.
like, strong-willed intention. It's just like, "Huh, I'm gonna make this," and then they do it.
Yeah. And it's that I think it's those 2 minds working together too, right? Because you got that impression. You're just like, "All right, I'm gonna do this thing," and then you start to get carried into it. You just feel and experience what that is. Start to,
Yeah.
like, demonstrate it, you know?
Yep. And it's just a easy, like, I made stickers for myself that just have like intention and action. Like, one is written in, they're bold, like intention is bold and result is bold. But so that way I see it and I think about it. It's on my computer. Like,
Can you give me an example of something that is accomplished? And it doesn't have to be specific, it can be hypothetical, but something that is accomplished with intention and not a lot of action, and something that is accomplished with a lot of action and not a lot of intention.
well, we can pull it straight into transurfing. Intention would be like, I'm going to go get the mail out of the mailbox. The action is just standing up, really, like, okay, go, and then all of a sudden I'm at the mailbox and I have the mail.
Right.
Simple. You know, the intention is just knowing you're going to do it, and the strong intention, and then action is just making the first step. So you can do that with just about anything. It's just knowing crystal clear what the result is that you want, really, right? That's the intention. The intention is knowing what result you want. And then strong action. I mean, I said this last week, but like in my head, I always see a welder. I just think of like a person who does welding for art, and they can just sit there and look out at a whole junkyard and just see all this metal, and they don't know what they're gonna make yet. But they're like, oh, this piece looks interesting. This piece looks interesting. And then all of a sudden they're welding, and then all of a sudden they have this crazy awesome sculpture. And so they know they're going to create something. That's the intention. They don't have a clear, crystal clear picture of what it's going to be, and how it should look, and like, oh, I'm going to make a spider, so it has to have these elements. Like, they're not doing that. They're just literally just going, I see this piece looks interesting. That looks interesting. Now let's go make something. And then they do, and then it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about, I don't know what chapter it's in. Maybe we haven't gotten there yet. But he talks about like how putting a layer at a time is how you create a masterpiece. It's not all done at once. It's like when you're working on a creative project, you come to it and you put something there, then you go away from it. You basically get it off your mind, and then you come back to it, and then you reevaluate it again, and then you go away from it and you come back again. That's from what he's talking about, the efficient process of creating some form of artistic work. And from what I can tell, he makes a very compelling argument.
Well, and I would say that would be the strong intention, not necessarily the strong action, because that would be the weaker side. Action would be the weaker side, because you come back to it. You're not sitting there planning out every step of the process and executing right now, right now, right now. It's kind of like, well, I'm done for now. I'll come back to it, but you know what you're creating still.
For me, I get so excited that when I'm creating something that I want to put it out right now, and just, but I think that if you don't do that, and then you are able to sort of let that gestation period kind of happen, then you can really tap in and create something that's a little bit like, that's how, if you want to create something extraordinary, I think,
Like the Beatles.
like the Beatles. I mean, they did a lot of extraordinary thing. I mean, I think George Martin had something to do with that, right? Like, it's probably it's not because of chance that they, were able to do what they were able to do in the studio. That's really probably what made them so world famous, is all of the crazy different experimental things that they got to do in the studio with tape, and they were brilliant in how they used it. But yeah, I mean, their producer obviously knew his stuff, and he was a tech smart, clever dude.
You think they were one of the first bands that did like the Paul is dead, man, miss him, miss him, miss him, like backwards?
Oh yeah, backmasking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. They did all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, all the panning and stuff that they had to do and bounce down drum tracks. I mean, tape back then, you could only record 4 tracks at one time. So in order to get 3 guitars and 4 vocals and drums and like all of these things onto a tape, it was like a whole process, man. It was crazy. We used to mess around a little bit with tape, and like digital media now makes it so much easier to record
Layer.
anything. Yeah. I mean, or just record anything at all properly.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, with the tools that they had, it's amazing what they did. And it's probably no wonder that they were able to run into that guy and other people who were brilliant as well with that sort of an attitude. I mean, from what I understood about the Beatles too, that they basically slept above the bar.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. And just played in it every night. And then, yeah, I mean, but incredible and sticking with it. But yeah, I mean, so influential in the world of production and sound design and engineering, just mind-bogglingly incredible. So I don't know, but anyway, but that's part of that uniqueness, right? Like they were doing something that no one else did. The Monkees could, do "I Want to Hold Your Hand." You wouldn't know that was, the Monkees or the Beatles, basically. But when you start to hear, some of the crazy stuff from Revolver and I mean, on and on. I mean, the White Album was one of my personal favorites, and Abbey Road.
Even
I
like,
could just
"Here Comes the Sun," when he's adding the sitars and stuff, it's like,
beautiful.
"Oh, whoa, far
Yeah,
out."
it's stunning. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I could talk about the Beatles a lot
Yeah, me too.
for a long time. I love the Beatles too, but I also love ABBA. I'm just gonna say, but it's inspiring, definitely, because it seems like, oh, you either you got one shot, you better like make it. No, it's like a friend of mine told me, and I think this is probably largely true. Is like once you have done something so many times that you just don't even care if the result comes anymore, that's when the result comes. Like you just get so
Well,
lost in the
yeah,
process. It's just pure action at that point, right?
and then you really have no importance on it because you got the thing, or you're more or less, like, you're becoming the thing. It's becoming the mundane thing now, almost, because it's not
Exactly.
new anymore, it's what you do.
Yeah. And he talks about that too. Yeah. Mentions that in the chapter. The mundane thing. It's kind of awesome, but it's kind of heartbreaking too. Because you're like, oh, I wanted to romanticize that thing.
Well, that's part of it's like having a crush.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, that's why we always seek to control our environment. That's why we're always looking for a cure for our boredom. It's the whole idea of having an intention and a goal to crush. It's like a crush.
We want to be able to control our reality.
Romanticize it, and yeah,
It's a primary need, it's something that,
and it's
but
like lassoing something that seems so far out of reach, and that's half the fun of it.
yeah, it's a game.
That's ultimately what it boils down to, is it is a game.
It is a
Like, we
game.
sit there and level up our characters on The Sims, it's the same thing. They might not have, like, the highest charisma, or, the highest intellect or whatever, but they're all things that can be developed
100%.
by playing the game.
Play the game. Hell yeah. Attune yourself to that frequency. Boredom, he says, as such, does not exist. Boredom is simply a constant and insatiable thirst to shape reality. A constant and insatiable thirst.
I like it. I don't know if I quite agree with it, but I do kinda like it, so
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with, well, I don't know, maybe I do.
I know, maybe I do too, I just haven't decided yet. I'm like
But definitely a lot of insight in this one.
Basically, the whole premise of Dances with Shadows, I think, is that you want to be lit up by the pendulum so you don't have to dance with your shadows.
I like that theory. I feel like it's like a engagement with polarity, right? Like the other side, and that's kind of like what the movement is, like understanding that so you can control it and not let it affect or sway you. It's like these shadows and these, shifts and awareness and all that stuff is kind of coming at you. It's coming to get after you. So if you can stay stable and balanced, then you don't get swept up in the matrix, and you can stay congruent to that. And then the pendulums will have no choice, since they can't ensnare you. They'll have to lift you up and help you out. And that seems like a more efficient way to engage with the pendulums than letting them steal all your energy. But
yeah.
In order to do that, it's necessary to basically understand yourself and embrace. How do you say it?
What? Stalk yourself?
Embrace your weird.
Oh, yeah. Because your weird is your superpower.
Weird is your superpower. Yeah. Embrace that. That's the whole game. And then from there, play the game.
Let's win it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to be plugged into the Matrix.
But
I'll play in this world.
I mean, yeah, I think the whole, like, don't get me wrong, I romanticize the whole let's go live out on a farm and have a,
Never gonna happen in my reality, though. I don't want to.
I just don't really care for that, if I'm honest. I mean, I wouldn't mind having some property and being able to, like, just go chill out in the woods in a camper for a few months out of the year when I wanted to or whatever. I'm a huge fan of that. I love being outside. I love the mountains and I love all that stuff, but it's just, I don't know. It's finding that balance. It's easy to romanticize things. Yeah, farms are a lot of work. I was a tree farmer, and it was brutal. It never stopped. There was always something to do.
I'm just thinking about, like, splitting wood and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, just chores. It's just
chores. Yeah.
It's constant chores. No, we are very fortunate.
No, we go to work. It's like,
it's true. It's true. But if, there are ways to kind of put yourself in a position to have more freedom, over time through how you choose to engage with work, and by following some passions and creating multiple skill sets and multiple streams of revenue or what have you, et cetera. Like, you can actually start to win some freedom from having to play the game. Yeah.
Oh, well, he talks about addiction in here too. About, like, quitting addictions and stuff. Though, if I'm being real, I wasn't really paying that great of attention at that part. I've used it before to quit smoking.
I used it to quit smoking too. And, when he's talking about, like, those thoughts that you're having where you're like, oh, this is the last time I'm going to eat this bag of chips or whatever, fill in the blank, right? This is the last time I'm going to X, Y, or Z. That's actually the pendulum itself. That's not you. That's the pendulum getting you to engage with it. So it's a sneaky little bugger. For anybody who has, who would like to look into that a little bit more, I so recommend The Easy Way to Stop Smoking by Alan Carr, and The Easy Way to Stop Drinking by Alan Carr, or something like that. He's got a whole series of easy ways. I don't think he's with us anymore, but he was a brilliant guy, and those books are excellent for helping understand the trap that is addiction. At least from a conscious level, I strongly recommend it. I know people do AA and stuff, and that's great. I don't have any problem with any of that, but I love the way he describes addiction and the metaphor that he uses for it. It's brilliant. The Easy Way to Stop Smoking, or The Easy Way to Stop Drinking by Alan Carr.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you that later because I dropped my pen. So
Yeah, that's cool. I'll text it over to you.
perfect.
But yeah, that is this chapter. I want to see. He says that it is impossible to beat a pendulum. Keep that in mind. That's why you either abandon the dangerous game altogether or create your own venture and become one of the pendulum's favorites. He says, in order to create your own game, which is what he recommends that we all do, you have to give yourself permission to be yourself, which is probably easier said than done for most of us, especially with all the levels of indoctrination and abuse.
Oh man, MK Ultra mind control.
Right. Media and all kinds of stuff. Oh my God. I love it.
Yeah, it's all sinister.
It is. But I think that if we just take the time, to lean in and embrace our own awareness, coming from that place of observer,
Yeah,
attempting to get perspective to
because you're
that
not going
place.
to change the world, but you can change your world, and that's really
Well, if enough people just change their world,
yeah,
then that spills over and it changes the whole world.
like the 100 monkey thing.
Well, yeah, that is an interesting idea too. Yeah, for sure. And there's implications there as well. But yeah, I mean, that's
As
all
we
you can do.
vibrate higher, the people around us will too. Yeah, I do believe that.
Because yeah, like the leverage to yank on somebody else, you try to manipulate somebody, it's coming back at you, man. There's consequences for that. And what do you gain from it? Really, really nothing. You have to allow everyone to be exactly as they are, take that energy and just devote it to yourself. Devote it to vibrating at and becoming your highest self, your higher self. I mean, that's the best way to approach it, I think. And then you will polarize yourself to that degree. And then when the pendulum swings, you're really not affected. You're a master. You're polarized there. Boom, on point. Yeah, I think it's such a cool exercise to just sit down, list it. What's your higher self's style? What kind of suit are they wearing? Or dress or whatever. Because like I don't think your higher self is some like perfect cherub, gown wearing angel, right? Like you came here to have fun. My higher self likes to party, in its own way, right? But to experience the world, what are those true elements of who you are? What are the characteristics and particularly the values of your higher self? And the more that we can just engage with that and think about it, the more we're literally radiating energy at it. And so you create maybe your own pendulum of you through that idea of the higher self and then transfigure yourself to it. And that's when the pendulums could light you up. Because I mean, if you're composing the image of your ideal self or your higher self, then who's doing that?
Who is doing that?
I think I would argue your higher self. Your lower self's not going to compose that image.
No. Yeah, no, that would be your heart, right?
I would think so.
Yeah. Which is your higher self, really.
Yeah, and then instead of having some goal that's really external and is dependent, right? Because that's one of the things he talks about too, is dependent relationships and how judgment works, which is a really powerful concept and idea through contradistinction. He will go on more later in the book about that. But anytime we compare, that's really what judgment is. So it's okay to call a spade, but when you judge it against something.
Yeah, I forgot about that. He's like, it's one thing to say I'm stupid or I'm ugly or I'm beautiful or I love myself, or I love you. But when you actually start causing issues with was this a bad luck part? Um, with either bad luck or balancing forces, whatever, when you make it a comparison, like, I love
Right.
you more than anyone on this earth. I am uglier than every girl in this room. Like, when you do those things, that's when you start having to. And I want to say that's a lot of the times where your run of bad luck will come from is.
Yeah, or if you don't call me back in 20 minutes, we're over. You're like, like if you or you don't love me,
You're just pushing a pendulum. It's
right.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, all of those things. Yeah, which is, I mean, all those things are coming from a place of wanting to control externally, right? And so ultimately, he's saying in this chapter that we want to be able to control reality, but we're doing it the sort of the wrong way. We're really doing it sort of out here, or we're trained to do it out here more than we are to do it from within, from internally, and allow the pendulums to just swing by and through instead of getting caught
Yeah.
up in these structures.
You're trying to change the mirror, like the frown in the mirror, by touching the mirror instead of
Yes.
changing what is going into the mirror.
What does Lehman say? I love it so much. If I want to shave my face, I don't shave the mirror.
No, that would be really dumb.
Yeah, it wouldn't work. So yeah, so here we are. Yeah, I love the idea of polarizing to your ideal. I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm implementing that. I'm going to continue to do it. Because he talks about in this book how you need to love yourself, and how hard is that? But it would be really easy to love your higher self version of yourself, right? Like, look what an amazing caricature that is, right? Like, that's easy to radiate at. But sometimes if we don't see ourselves there yet, we tend to kind of beat ourselves up. We can be kind of mean and rude and harsh to ourselves. But if we have that idealized image, I think that might help just to bump up some of that self-love.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my rant for the day. But yeah, I love the judgment stuff. The judgment stuff, it made sense to me. Like the first time I read this book, it blew my mind. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because it's like you can say, hey, that person's promiscuous, but if you say that person's promiscuous, so I'm better than them because I'm not promiscuous, now you've created excess potential and balancing forces. Now that's a judgment. Calling something what it is not a judgment. Calling something what it is just simply merely stating a fact. But comparing it and having relationships that are codependent or dependent on certain things, or ideas about certain conditional things, is going to stir up and create balancing forces, and the wind of balancing forces will come in balance every single time. But yeah, in order to create your own game, you have to give yourself permission to be yourself. So good luck with that. You can do it. You can do it. For sure.
Highest possible timeline.
Highest possible. Yeah, exactly. And for me, I'm just going to try to start, like I said, identifying that in that quantum entanglement way with the higher self. Because then I don't have to worry about any of the details of external. They'll take care of themselves.
Yes, they will.
That's the plan, right? I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see how it goes.
That's the intention.
Yeah. I like that better. Well, what are you guys talking about on Good Guys this week? Do you know yet?
I don't know. We haven't discussed it. We haven't been really going with a theme lately, which is so unlike us, but we're free flowing. I don't know if
like
we're
it.
having a guest or not. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. It's a good time. You'll have great chemistry. It's a fun show.
It is fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah. And I'm working on some new materials and stuff. I'm going to try to work on some videos, new videos as well. And yeah, I got the summary out there. I'm working on another project, which I'll announce very soon. I'm excited about. I'm learning a lot. I like learning. Learning is cool. I'm a big fan. So keeping it real over here. And yeah, anything you want to throw out there for the people, Abbie, before we hop off here?
I should have some like profound closing statement, but I don't, so I'll just say goodnight.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I should definitely not attempt a profound closing statement, but I'll say goodnight. Thanks everybody for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Okay, cool. So look at that. I'm glad I asked about it. Bun says the action, intention, result triangle was a gem. Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to make a video on that. I'm trying to understand it more clearly, to be honest.
It's so clear though. What? It's
Yeah.
confusing.
There are some things that are kind of maybe nuanced that I want to pick apart there. And
Okay.
we'll talk about it more.
Okay.
It's a good thing. And maybe I'll just do like an intro video and then we can break it down further or something. Who knows? But I appreciate everybody here. Thanks for coming and hanging out and chatting.
Love y'all.
Great turnout. Thanks so much for being here. We did the Instagram thing. I don't know how that did. A few people joined. Hey, all right. That's cool. Rock Finn, much love to all of y'all. Thanks for being here. Y'all are great. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week with another banging chapter of Reality Transurfing. The Dreams of the Gods is coming up, and it's a good one. So definitely tune in for that. Thanks so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.